Hello and welcome to Labour Lens. I am Sharon Ijason. On this week edition of the program, we'll continue on the series of the International Labour Organization 111th Conference happening here in Geneva, Switzerland. We'll be focusing on this edition on just transition and also look at the several parameters towards ensuring that Nigeria is ready for this transition. We will be right back.
The Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Women Commission has taken the campaign for women participation in trade unions to the grassroots to boost women participation in unionism. The leadership of the commission also informed that the campaign, which includes interactive sessions with all members, would aid increased women participation in top leadership positions in the country.
We decided that we should go below the bottom to actually relate with them, hear from them, interact with them, know their challenges and the way forward, to actually make sure that there is increase in women participation in unionism. Like we said, we cannot, achieve our aim of becoming leaders in strategic positions unless we actually understand the trade unionism. So the essence of this tour is to familiarize with all our members in different zones, encourage them, equip them, give them all the knowledge and tools that they need.
First of all, is to create further awareness for women. And one of the ways is by doing this familiarization tour, which is announcing to the women that there's been a change in our way of thinking, change the women mindset on seeing themselves as, hey, I'm just a woman. That mindset of I'm just a woman limits our thinking. This is more apt because in this era, the future is women. Women are breaking barriers, women are shattering the glass table, the glass ceiling, women are doing things that hitherto had been left in the space for men.
Pengassan Lagos Zonal Chairman Abeng Ayam highlighted the need for women inclusion for economic growth. The commission, previously known as Women in Pengassan (WIP), was signed into law in 2022, with the part of its aim consisting of creating enough platform to nurture and build women to contest for other positions which they never ventured. Labour centers in Nigeria and Solidarity Center held a workshop to address the issue of gender-based violence and harassment in the world of work. During the workshop, participants engaged in intense discussions, sharing experiences and best practices from various industries. Participants stressed the importance of raising awareness, promoting gender equality, and fostering a culture of respect and inclusivity in all workplaces.
And the same energy, the same pressure that we put in making sure Nigeria ratify is the same that we are going to put forward to make sure that it is also implemented. Because that is, ratification is one leg of it, implementation is the second one. And as a pressure group, we put the pressure that we need. We provide the support that we need to do. We will mobilize, because we are a membership-based organization. We have a lot of followers. We will also popularize it because people need to understand what the C190 is all about.
Basically, what this is going to do for us after we leave here is just to expect the focal persons to take the message back home. Yes, we are grateful the government has ratified, but enforcement and implementation. And it now brings us back to training and creating awareness. A lot of people do not even know about this convention. I would say we are opportune because we are labor leaders. We are representatives of the workers. But even under us, how many workers do have knowledge of this convention?
This follows the ratification of the Convention C-190 by the federal government of Nigeria, making Nigeria the first West African country to ratify it.
We come up with new strategies to address this problem. I call it an epidemic. In a research that we conducted with the Nigeria Labour Congress, more than half of the workers, women workers, complain about sexually being harassed, or gender-based violence and harassment in the world of work, and then they have nowhere to go to. There's no reporting mechanisms, and even a lot of times when reports are made, employers don't hold the perpetrators accountable. So my hope is at the end of this workshop, we come up with new strategies and then work collectively to actually address this problem.
From today's program, after federal government has ratified Convention C-190, we are looking at the next thing for us and for the government, and the next step to take for us to be able to, reduce to the BRS minimum level the issue of the gender-based violence at the places of work.
The International Labour Organization held its 111th annual conference in Geneva from 5th to 16th June 2023. Worker, employer and government delegates from the ILO 187 member states addressed a wide range of issues, including a just transition towards sustainable and inclusive economies, quality apprenticeship and labor protection.
We return to the first item on our agenda, and that is the election of the officers of the governing body for the 2023-2024, as we need to elect the employer and worker vice chairpersons.
The Director General of the International Labour Organization, Gilbert Ungo, spoke about various challenges the world of work is faced with, highlighting that for social justice to prevail, there must be an end to child labor.
Child labor is on the rise. 160 million children, almost 1 in 10 worldwide, are in child labor. And what is worst, half of them, 80 million, are in the most hazardous forms of child labor. That's work with a real threat to their physical and mental health. But child labor rarely happens because parents are bad or do not care. No, rather, it is spring from a lack of social justice.
According to research, more than 4 billion people have no social protection and 240 million workers live below the poverty line. During the conference, the International Labour Organization, ILO, held the first World of Work Summit with the theme Social Justice for All.
To join forces to contribute to the realization of the proposed Global Coalition for Social Justice. Together, I do believe that we can create a world where every individual, regardless of their background or circumstances, has equal access to opportunities, has equal access to rights, and a decent quality life.
Social justice for all is never going to be free of charge or famously cheap. And we happened to have settled the most important unasked question of this summit: who bears the burden of social justice for all? The answer is that for social justice for all to translate into meaningful transformation of the conditions of work, and for the World of Work Summit to fully articulate the aspirations of the constituencies represented here, we have to urgently invest in ambitious ways of getting millions of unemployed people, especially in the global south, to work, and to take bold institutional measures to deliberately create opportunities for them.
After 2 weeks of intense deliberations and strategic consultations, the 111th Conference of the International Labour Organization, ILO, ended in Geneva, Switzerland.
We heard resounding and unequivocal support for a global coalition for social justice. We must now build on this momentum.
At the end of the conference, newly elected chairperson of the governing board of ILO, Richard Adejola, presided over the meeting of the body. Speaking on expectations from ILO members, Adejola thanked them for the confidence reposed in Nigeria. He promised that the trust will be respected with all sense of responsibility.
Our policy outcomes and decisions should inspire hope for a better quality of life and new opportunities. We are ready to deliver on the mandate entrusted to us, prepared to serve, listen, and to align with our common goal of leaving no one behind. Together, we will harness our potentials and draw strength from our unique tripartite governance structure to consolidate on our post-centenary and pandemic gains.
Several adoptions and resolutions were made at the conclusion of the conference. One of these is the new labor standard aimed at supporting opportunities for people of all ages to skill, reskill, and upskill continuously in rapidly changing labor markets. The Director General ILO, who addressed delegates from 187 member countries, encouraged government to reposition social justice as the keystone of global recovery and ensure that the future is human-centered. On the profile interview segment this week, I'll be speaking with the Director General of the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association. He brought us up to speed on several conversations that he has been part of during the conference here in Geneva, Switzerland. He also spoke about just transition and also the need for social protection for Nigerian workers. Once again, it's the 111th ILO conference here in Geneva, Switzerland. And there's been lots of conversations that will promote decent work and social justice. Particularly, I would like you to respond to the question or the discussion of social protection. Generally, what do you think various stakeholders need to do or bring to the table to ensure that probably social protection will be prioritized back at home?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us. First is the reality that we have vulnerable people everywhere, not only in our country, Nigeria. And the big idea of not leaving anybody behind, is also at the base of the concept of social protection. So that as much as possible, we protect those that are vulnerable, we protect also those that have the risk of being vulnerable. And it's very important that we are not left behind. Quite a lot is being done within the context of social protection in Nigeria, but there's been questions. We've raised questions about the validity of the process that led us to select those that will become vulnerable. Is it based on appropriate data? Is it based on appropriate research? Because those things are driven by research. They are driven by data. If you don't have them, then you're probably running unregulated charity, as we call it. So first thing we have to do is to get appropriate data. What exactly is our definition of vulnerable, if somebody is vulnerable? How do you determine who is vulnerable? Once you have that in place, then you can move to the concept of, okay, what exactly do we now want to do for the vulnerable that will assist them to be integrated into the society, inclusively. So for Nigeria, there's quite a lot that can still be done. For us, it's no more about just giving money to people. It's about empowering them economically. Because if they're empowered, it comes back to all of us. If you put cash, in whatever context, into the hands of the vulnerable, they most likely will purchase goods and services. We also fit into the ecosystem of the economy as a whole. So the more their capacity to buy is enhanced, the more the capacity of businesses to sell and produce, the more the capacity of businesses to employ more, the more the capacity of government to generate more income within the context of corporate tax and also personal income tax. So it's a whole gamut of positive will if we get it right. We hope the new government will take a second look at what has been done before. I said we have serious issues with the process that led us to the determination of those figures. We've touted figures, 10 million. We say we'll share 800 million loan to 5 million vulnerable households. How do we arrive at those figures? If you don't get the figure right, then you have created a system that will be riddled with corruption, because you can do a lot with so much cash. You can do so little with so much cash if you don't have appropriate data.
Talking about database, it's so unfortunate that despite different programs that government has proposed before now, we still do not have a database whereby we can determine the number of people that we even have in the country, despite even the NIN registration and all. As organized private sector, what more do you think needs to be done to ensure that we capture everyone?
Well, we have to get our priorities right. We missed the opportunity during COVID. During COVID, all of us were vulnerable. And it was an opportunity to capture as many people as possible into the database. That if you need support, if you need 1,000 naira from government in the context of grant, in the context of loan, then get yourself into the database. So once you capture everybody into the database through that circumstantial event, then you have something to start with. So what we advise is first, let's start with getting the appropriate data. Through programs, through schemes that government will come up with, let's get everybody as much as possible, get them into the system. The Naira redesign policy will have been a good opportunity for us to include everybody into the banking system. But rather than include them, we find ourselves excluding so many persons. So we have to come up with a scheme that will encourage individuals to voluntarily come into the system. Because the fear initially for many people is, look, if I come into the system, then I am open to exploitation. I'm open to multiplicity of taxes. I'm open to so many things. So government have to breach that trust. So let people come into the system voluntarily so you can track income flow. So we know who is vulnerable, we know who is not vulnerable at every point in time. And that will help us to now move to the next level of coming up with schemes and programs that will address the vulnerable.
Talking about just transition, which is one of the fundamental conversation ongoing, sustainable, renewable energy and all. I know you're part of that conversation. How prepared is the organized private sector? What more is the organized private sector doing to ensure that they also are prepared for this future of work?
Yeah, one of the interesting committees whose work has been extended progressively is the Just Transition Committee, because of so many issues that came up within that committee. So sustainability long term, skills development to meet the new realities long term, the need to progressively move away from fossil fuel. Actually, the world is moving, so our options is limited. We have to also move progressively. Conversation on sustainability, on green, is also taking place, and it has been decided, it has been researched that through green jobs alone, we can generate the world can generate more than 10 million jobs. Now, if you distill it down to our country, we have challenges with unemployment, we have challenges with underemployment, and sustainability and green economy, but the Just Transition Project itself gives us an opportunity to start creating alternatives for our job creation. We can't be focusing on just the traditional job creation schemes that we have. I think government will do well that we start that conversation deeply. There are conversations already that we are having as NECA on the issue of just transition with the International Labour Organization. I think there's need for us to upskill it because it provides a huge opportunity for us to divert the attention of our young ones to the opportunities in green, in renewable energy. Now, we're having challenges with fuel subsidy removal. Thank God the government has demonstrated the political will to remove it. Fuel will be what it is. And the way it is for now is more like a product with inelastic demand. So we need to deliberately create opportunities in the renewable energy sector, create jobs, create opportunities for entrepreneurs, and create wealth for our nation. The need for even the Ministry of Labour and everybody involved in the skills conversation for us to start looking at where do we intervene now before the issue will catch up with us. The challenge we have with AI, artificial intelligence, is while we were watching, the world was moving. And now we have the artificial intelligence now becoming more like a threat to Africa, or more like to so many countries. We don't want the issue of job creation to also become not a time bomb now, but a nuclear bomb for Africa, because with the mass of Nigerians, mass of Africans leaving the country, going for greener pastures, I think we have to do something about it. And renewable energies is a way to address all those issues of our young, bright talents leaving the African continent for Europe.
There was this information that there's a job mismatch in Europe. Back at home, would you say that Africa or Nigeria is faced with similar challenge?
I think what we have is basically skills mismatch in Nigeria, as it were. We have jobs, but you don't have people with qualified, relevant skills to man those jobs. And that also calls into question the quality or the relevance of our academic system. And there is need for the GAO to collaborate more with the industry, so that whatever the industry is churning out is relevant for whatever the GAO is churning out is relevant to the industry. It's less of the supply side now, or we must focus on the supply side, not on the demand side. The employers are the demand for those skills, but the supply side must also sit up in such a way that it can produce what is demanded. Because if you produce and the consumer is not consuming it, then you are creating a different kind of problem, not only for yourself, but for the whole country itself. So our view is there's massive skills mismatch, and we need to deliberately refocus so that the supply side, the universities, the polytechnics, can actually tailor the curriculum to what the industry needs now, and also what the industry will need in 5 years' time, what the industry will need in 10 years' time. If we don't do that, you realize you keep churning out graduates that are not relevant to the context of the work for now.
The Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, in which you are the DG, released a statement, and it was tagged beyond the national minimum wage, that there should be a seamless transition of the change in the minimum wage. And you also had concerns about what will be sustainable for the enterprise of a business. What more would you want to explain towards achieving a just transition of a new national minimum wage?
The national minimum wage is driven by the tripartite, the employers, the workers, and government. We don't legislate it. It has to be a negotiation with the tripartite. That was the convention of a high low. So first, the tripartite needs to be constituted. The National Minimum Wage Committee needs to be reconstituted to drive that process. You don't drive it from the top. You drive it down up. That's the National Minimum Wage Committee meeting, negotiating, and coming up with a recommendation to government. That is the process. But our view is this: beyond the national minimum wage, we also need to look at the issue of enterprise sustainability, which is also one of the key conversations that is going on at the high low. You can set a minimum wage, but one of the key factors you must also consider is its sustainability. If the enterprises are not sustainable, if the environment for them to thrive or to be sustainable is not there, they will have agreed on a figure that ab initio they can meet up with. If government as an enterprise now is also having challenges with revenue, if it doesn't deal with revenue issues, then you'll have agreed on a figure that is also not sustainable for government. Now, 30,000 minimum wage, we have about over 20 states not paying. Why are they not paying? What exactly should we be looking at? Will minimum wage alone suffice, or do we have to look at the whole concept of standard of living of an average Nigerian? So while we'll go ahead and deal with the issue of minimum wage, it is due for renegotiation, because by 2024 we should have another minimum wage. But we should also take cognizance of those critical parameters that makes it sustainable. we don't want to come to ILO next year or the year after and dragging the country to CAS to say we've negotiated minimum wage and the government is not paying, or we couldn't agree on national minimum wage. We don't really have to do that. But to avoid that, we have to put those structures in place that will not lead us to only setting the minimum wage, but that will also make the average Nigerian, a standard of living, make it human, and also keep more money basically in the hands of everybody, beyond workers, beyond employers. I think the focus progressively now should be on how do we increase the standard of living of everybody. If you increase the standard of living of all Nigerians, most Nigerians are gainfully employed, they are working in decent employment, and marginal increases in cost of goods will not really affect them because sustainably they're gainfully employed, salary is progressively increasing. In the private sector, we have a mechanism already, the collective bargaining mechanisms, that helps us to negotiate wages or to renegotiate wages every 2 years. So in reality, even the minimum wage in the private sector is not 30,000, but we must get it right. It is important that we don't harangue ourselves to arrive at a figure that ab initio we all know the socio-economic reality of our country cannot meet. But so far is to say that we must get that structure right. That is the tripartite, the National Minimum Wage Committee that sets national minimum wage.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
And that's all we can take on today's edition of the program. Join us next week for a fresh edition of the show. I am Sharon Ijason. Thanks for watching, and remember that labor creates wealth.